The story of the P-51 Mustang does not begin in the sky but in the fear-filled darkness over Europe, where American bomber crews sat inside the metallic bellies of their flying fortresses and liberators, listening to the rumbling engines and waiting for the inevitable moment when the Luftwaffe would rise to tear them apart, because before the Mustang arrived, those bombers were flying blind and vulnerable deep into enemy territory, inching across the gray skies like slow steel whales while German fighters circled above like predatory birds, and the men inside could only hope their guns and luck would keep them alive long enough to return home. But by late 1943, hope alone wasn't enough, because Germany still ruled the air with their deadly Bf-109s and Fw-190s, aircraft that climbed faster, dove harder, and hit like lightning. And no American escort fighter could follow the bombers all the way to their targets in the heart of the Reich, which meant the Luftwaffe would simply wait for the P-47s and P-38s to turn back, then pounce on the unguarded formations and rip them open with cannon fire, leaving smoking ruins of planes falling in slow spirals toward the cold European fields below. And this brutal air war became so predictable that German pilots joked grimly about it. Wait for the escorts to leave, then the hunt begins. But everything changed when a new shape appeared on the horizon, lean, elegant, and deadly, with wings that seemed to slice the air and a roar so deep it shook the bones of the men who heard it, because the P-51 Mustang had arrived, and from the moment its Merlin-powered engine unleashed its full fury, the balance of the sky shifted forever. German pilots had heard whispers about a new American fighter, but none believed a foreign aircraft could challenge the mastery they had held since 1939, yet the first time the Mustang dove into combat, its speed, range, and maneuverability stunned even veteran Luftwaffe aces, who suddenly found themselves chased through clouds by an enemy that did not fade, did not fall behind, and did not break off the attack, no matter how desperate their escape maneuvers became, because the Mustang could outrun them in level flight, outclimb them at altitude, and outdive them in a deadly downward plunge that shook the oxygen masks of both hunter and hunted, and for many German pilots, the moment they realized they were being pursued by a P-51 was the moment they felt death breathing just inches from their cockpit glass, a feeling recorded in journals recovered long after the war, where trembling handwriting confessed, "Once the Mustangs appear, the battle is finished." For no amount of training or experience could prepare them for an aircraft born from desperation but perfected into a machine of surgical lethality, one designed not only to fight but to chase, to escort, to endure, and to dominate skies that had once belonged to Germany alone. And as the Mustang began escorting bombers deeper and deeper into the German heartland, slicing through the cold, thin air at altitudes where engines gasped and metal groaned, the Luftwaffe discovered something far more terrifying than a fast enemy, an enemy that never turned back, because the P-51's long-range fuel tanks allowed it to follow American bomber groups all the way to Berlin and beyond, a feat the Germans had believed impossible. A nightmare scenario that forced commanders to rewrite every assumption they had made since the war began, for how could an aircraft accompany bombers across hundreds of miles of hostile airspace, fight off attackers, and still have fuel to spare to chase fleeing fighters until they fell from the sky? And on those long, frozen mornings when the bombers approached German territory, their crews would hold their breath waiting for the moment the escorts would peel away. But instead, they saw the Mustangs still there, flying beside them like silent guardians, their pilots alert, scanning the skies with steady eyes, hands gripping the controls with a kind of calm confidence that spread through the bomber crews like warmth, because for the first time, they did not feel abandoned, did not feel like helpless targets drifting into the jaws of the enemy. Instead, they felt protected, shielded by silver-winged wolves who waited for the German fighters to appear and dared them to come closer. And when the Luftwaffe finally rose to meet them, expecting another easy massacre, they met the Mustangs instead, slicing through clouds and diving with sun-glinting fury, guns blazing, engines screaming, and in that moment, German pilots realized with cold dread that the sky no longer belonged to them. Before we continue, please let me know, did anyone in your family fight in or live through World War II? Share their stories in the comments. Let's continue the story. Because as the Mustangs carved wide arcs through the sky, chasing down every enemy silhouette they found, The very rhythm of air combat changed, and German commanders felt the shift like a tightening noose, because missions that once required only a few fighters to intercept now demanded entire squadrons, and even then, many of their pilots returned shaken, some refusing to speak, others whispering that the Americans had created the perfect killer of the Luftwaffe. But the truth was even harsher. The Mustang wasn't just a machine, it was a strategy, a message, a declaration that America would not only reach Germany's borders but fly past them, penetrate their defenses, burn their factories, cripple their oil fields, and return home safely, escorted by hunters who prowled the sky like avenging spirits, punishing every German attempt to resist with relentless precision. And this unshakable presence wore down the Luftwaffe faster than bullets ever could, because Germany could replace aircraft, but not pilots, and the Mustang's arrival coincided with a devastating attrition spiral that saw experienced German aces fall one by one, replaced by young, frightened recruits who had only a handful of training hours before being thrown into the blistering chaos of battle, where the Mustang's speed and altitude advantage meant these new pilots often never saw the aircraft that killed them. And as bomber groups pressed deeper towards strategic targets, synthetic fuel plants, ball-bearing factories, submarine pens, and key industrial cities, Mustangs flew ahead like spearpoints, cutting through German fighter formations with such ferocity that Luftwaffe coordination began to crumble, communication broke down, and entire units found themselves overwhelmed by an enemy that always seemed to be in the right place at the right time, as if the Mustang pilots could read their minds, anticipating ambushes and diving from the sun with lethal timing. And while the skies became deadlier for Germany, on the ground in command bunkers across the Reich, panic spread quietly but unmistakably, whispered behind closed doors, communicated through terse reports and clipped radio messages, because Hitler himself demanded answers, furious that his once invincible Luftwaffe had been humbled by a foreign fighter that Germany had not predicted, had not copied, and could not counter fast enough, for even as engineers scrambled to improve the Bf-109 and Fw-190, Germany's dwindling resources meant production slowed, fuel shortages grew, and pilots were forced to limit training flights to conserve precious aviation gasoline, leaving them even less prepared to face the Mustang in combat. Meanwhile, on the American side, pilots slid into their cockpit seats with a confidence that bordered on destiny, running their gloved fingers across the metal edges of their controls, adjusting their oxygen masks, and staring out at the wide, endless sky with the unshakable belief that their aircraft could carry them through anything, because they knew the Mustang could climb higher than many German fighters, dive faster without ripping its wings apart, and turn sharply enough to keep its guns locked onto a fleeing enemy long after other Allied planes would have lost the angle. And that combination of performance meant that even highly skilled German aces who attempted their old escape maneuvers found themselves hunted down, caught, and destroyed by a fighter that simply refused to let go. And every time the Mustangs escorted bombers toward targets approaching Berlin, German civilians watched from the ground in astonishment as silver planes flew overhead in tight formations, their escorts weaving around them like shadows. And rumors began to spread even among ordinary people that a new American aircraft had taken control of the skies, a machine that no German pilot could outrun, and this growing fear became a quiet but powerful blow to German morale, as families watched the smoke of bombed factories rising into the sky and wondered how much longer the war could be sustained. And inside Luftwaffe headquarters, debates grew heated and bitter, with some officers arguing that Germany needed jet aircraft immediately, while others insisted that no technology could solve the fundamental issue that the Americans now held: numerical superiority, fuel superiority, training superiority, and organizational superiority, all reinforced by the Mustang's ability to maintain an unbroken chain of air dominance that stretched from the English Channel to the outskirts of eastern Germany. And as 1944 unfolded, this dominance became painfully obvious during the massive Allied raids on key German infrastructure, where waves of bombers poured into the heart of the Reich while Mustangs carved a protective dome around them, diving into dogfights with fearless aggression, shredding German fighters before they could even reach the formation, leaving the sky littered with spiraling smoke trails and burning wreckage falling toward the forests and fields below. And with each mission, the Luftwaffe bled more, lost more, and recovered less, until one by one, entire German fighter wings became shadows of their former strength, grounded not by lack of courage but by lack of fuel, aircraft, and experienced pilots. And as German ace after ace was shot down or forced to abandon the fight, the Mustang pilots gained confidence and experience with alarming speed, turning rookies into hardened veterans in a matter of months, creating a new generation of air warriors who understood the psychological power of their aircraft as much as its technical capabilities, sometimes flying low over German airfields after successful missions just to taunt the grounded enemy. Knowing full well that the Luftwaffe could no longer respond effectively, and these moments of psychological dominance were not simply arrogance. They were warnings, signals to Germany that the skies were no longer a battleground but a foregone conclusion, a realm where the Mustang reigned supreme. And as Allied troops prepared for the invasion of France, the relentless clearing of the skies by P-51 squadrons ensured that German forces would be blind and vulnerable from above when the ground invasion finally came. If you already watched till this part, so please comment below your city name. Let's continue the story. Which meant that when D-Day finally arrived on June 6, 1944, German commanders waiting along the beaches of Normandy found themselves scanning the sky in desperation, hoping for some sign of Luftwaffe reinforcements, but instead seeing only Mustangs slicing through the morning clouds, diving on convoys, strafing communications trucks, ripping apart ammunition depots, and severing German lines of movement so ruthlessly that many ground troops reported feeling abandoned from the very first hours of the invasion. And this helplessness was not an accident but the direct result of months of Mustang dominance, because by the time the first Allied soldiers stepped onto the sand, the Luftwaffe had already been crippled in the air war that had taken place high above Europe's rivers, forests, and ruined cities, and even as German commanders attempted to move reinforcements toward the front, Mustangs hunted their convoys from above, forcing them to travel only at night or under heavy camouflage. But the Mustang pilots quickly adapted, learning to spot the thin outlines of tracks carved into soft earth, the flicker of headlights hidden under branches, or the sudden rush of movement along forest roads, and they pounced relentlessly, turning every attempted German counterattack into a dangerous gamble. And all throughout 1944, the same pattern repeated. Wherever the Luftwaffe tried to contest the sky, Mustangs appeared, escorting bombers or prowling alone, engines roaring with a confidence that echoed across the countryside, and German soldiers on the ground soon recognized the distinctive shape of the P-51 overhead, many of them muttering curses or sighs of resignation as they watched the fast American fighters circle like predatory birds, choosing their moment to strike. And as the months dragged on, the dwindling ranks of German pilots found themselves fighting in a world that no longer favored them. Flying worn-out aircraft with limited fuel, carrying fewer rounds of ammunition, and launching into missions with the grim realization that they might not return, not because they lacked skill, but because the sky itself belonged to the Mustang now. And when the Allies launched deep raids against German oil fields, most crucially those at Ploiești, Luna, and Politz, the Mustangs again served as the decisive force, ripping apart German interceptors, shielding bombers with almost fanatical determination, and ensuring that Germany's vital fuel reserves shrank faster than they could be replenished, a slow suffocation that left tanks stranded, trucks immobile, and aircraft grounded, turning the Third Reich's mechanized war machine into a hollow shell of what it had been in 1940. And yet even as Germany collapsed, the Mustang continued to evolve, with ground crews modifying engines, improving radios, and refining tactics, making the aircraft even more deadly, and American pilots found themselves flying deeper into the Reich than ever before, often landing on newly captured airfields in France or Belgium, refueling, and heading back into the sky within hours, the relentless tempo of the air war grinding down what little resistance remained, and German officers could only watch in despair as the once proud Luftwaffe, the force that had helped conquer half of Europe, was reduced to a scattered collection of desperate fighter groups that lacked not only aircraft but the morale to continue fighting, because by 1945, many Luftwaffe pilots openly admitted that they feared the Mustangs more than anything else in the sky, describing encounters where the American fighters appeared suddenly out of the clouds, guns blazing, moving with such precision and purpose that even veteran aces felt overwhelmed, and this psychological dominance spread through the remaining German ranks like an infection, sapping their will to resist. And when Germany finally deployed its revolutionary Me-262 jet fighter, too little fuel, too few pilots, and too many mechanical problems meant the jet never had the chance to change the tide, because Mustangs stationed near airfields learned to attack the 262s during takeoff and landing, exploiting the jet's vulnerability at low speed, and turning Germany's last technological hope into yet another failed attempt to reclaim the skies. And as the war drew to its final months, the Mustang became more than just a weapon, it became a symbol of approaching Allied victory, a sign to soldiers on the ground, prisoners in camps, and civilians hiding in rubble that liberation was coming from above, carried in the roar of that unmistakable Rolls-Royce Merlin engine echoing across ruined cities and broken front lines. And when the Allies finally crossed the Rhine and pushed into the heart of Germany, Mustangs flew overhead almost constantly, strafing rail lines, shielding advancing troops, and destroying any remaining pockets of resistance, until at last, with Berlin on the verge of collapse and the Reichstag trembling under artillery fire, the few surviving Luftwaffe units attempted one final, desperate defense, but the Mustangs swept them aside with ease, scattering them like leaves in a storm, ending a battle that had been decided long before, on the day the first Mustang took flight. And so, by the time Germany surrendered in May 1945, the story was clear to anyone who had fought in the skies over Europe. The Luftwaffe had not merely been defeated, it had been hunted, cornered, and dismantled piece by an aircraft that combined speed, power, endurance, and precision in a way the world had never seen before. And years later, historians, pilots, and engineers would all agree on one truth: the P-51 Mustang had not just supported the Allied victory, it had reshaped the very nature of air war, turning the skies over Europe from a deadly battleground into a domain dominated completely by a single, unstoppable force that Germany could not outrun, could not outfight, and could not survive. If you found this story compelling, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered, and we would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you are watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania, from veterans to history enthusiasts. You are part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.